Hello MTG community, and welcome to my first YouTube video and my first deck tech. So I want to present to all of you a very janky deck idea called Maze Titan. So basically, you're trying to win the game with a land card called Maze's End, and you can pay 3 and tap it to return it to your hand, search your library for a gate card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. If you control 10 or more gates with different names, you win the game. So at first this card might not seem very fair because you're basically automatically winning the game. However, assembling 10 different gates is very difficult, and what's even harder is all the gates enter the battlefield tapped. So when thinking about how to win with this card, I kind of looked at decks that were already established in the modern meta to try to find a shell that it could work in. I felt as though Bloom Titan had all the tools to make this deck viable, particularly Amulet of Vigor. And it's a 1-drop artifact. Whenever a permanent enters the battlefield tapped and under your control, untap it. So basically, if you can get an Amulet of Vigor turn 1, then all your gates suddenly come into play untapped, and that really helps you start casting things and not being behind on resources. So let's go over the rest of the land base. We have Bojuka Bog. When it enters, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So this is great against dredge strategies, or any type of deck that's utilizing the graveyard, say like Snapcaster Mage or Delve. We have Cavern of Souls, and when you play this card, you really want to call Giant, because if you're up against a blue deck, you really want your Primeval Titan to not get countered. We have Colony Garden, and when it enters, you get a 0/1 green plant creature token. So essentially, you're just looking for a chump blocker to make the game last longer, to drag on, so you can win with Maze's End. We have Simic Growth Chamber, and when it enters, you have to return a land you control to your hand. So by having this, you can bounce your Colony Garden to make another chump blocker, or you can bounce your Bojuka Bog, so you can exile the graveyard a second time. And we also have Teleria West, which has Transmute, and when you transmute it, you can search for, say, a missing guild gate that you need to close out the game, or you can transmute for a Slaughter Pact or Summoner's Pact. And then we're also playing 8 basic forests, because we actually do want some lands that come into play untapped, because unfortunately Bojuka Bog, Colony Garden, Maze's End, Simic Growth Chamber, Teleria West, all these lands come into play tapped. So going back to the instance, we have Slaughter Pact, which costs 0 to play, so it's free at instant speed, and you can destroy a non-black creature. However, at the beginning of your next upkeep, you have to pay 2 colorless and a swamp. If you don't, you lose the game. So we can actually pay for that in the form of Bojuka Bog, Dimir Guildgate, Golgari Guildgate, or Orzhov Guildgate. And the neat thing about this card is, if you have an enchantment on the field called Hive Mind, which is whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, each other player copies that spell. Each of those players may choose new targets for his or her copy. So if you do have this card on the field, and you cast a Slaughter Pact, then your opponent gets to copy the pact. So when they copy it, the clause pertaining to them losing the game if they don't pay 2 colorless and a swamp does apply to them as well. So if they're not playing a black deck, or if they can't produce black mana, then there's a secondary combo right there that you can use to win the game if you're not able to close out the game with Maze's End. And for our other instant speed spell, we have a Summoner's Pact, which again costs 0 to cast at instant speed, and you can search your library for a green creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Then shuffle your library. At the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 2 colorless and 2 green sources. If you don't, you lose the game. So we use this to find our Primeval Titan. And once you get this guy down, your Maze's End dream starts to become a reality. So he has Trample, he's a 6/6 creature, and whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, you may search your library for up to 2 land cards. So you're not limited to basic lands, hence you can search for your gates or your Maze's End. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Our other creatures consist of Azusa, Lost But Seeking, and we only play 2 copies because she is legendary, and she ramps very, very quickly. Her ability is insane. You can play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. So if you have a hand with a lot of guild gates and you manage to get her out on, say, turn 2 or turn 3, and you can start playing those gates much, much faster, and you could start getting closer to 6 land to hardcast your Primeval Titan. We're also playing a Courser of Kruphix, which is used to gain some life, so it's good against burn. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, you can gain a life, and you play with the top card of your library revealed, and if it's a land card, you can play it. So you're also deck thinning quite a bit. Because we're not playing any fetch lands, we don't really have a way to deck thin very consistently, and Courser helps with that. We're also playing Sakura Tribe Scout, and she's a great 1-drop. You can tap her, and you can put a land card from your hand into play. So yet again another ramp creature to get to 6 mana to cast your Primeval Titan. And then we're also playing 2 copies of Spellskite because it costs 2 colorless, so we don't have to worry about mana constraints, and it's just a great blocker. It has 4 toughness, so it survives against Lightning Bolt, and the ability is Phyrexian mana, so we don't even have to have blue mana up, and it's just a great defender to stall us out so we can try and close out the game with Maze's End. And then finally, for our sorcery speed spells, we play 4 copies of Ancient Stirrings, and we use this to find missing guild gates, or just lands in general, so we never miss a land drop. And you look at the top 5 cards of your library, and you can reveal a colorless card from among them, and put it into your hand. So lands are all colorless, so you can hit any one of these with Ancient Stirrings. We play 4 copies of Explore, and you can play an additional land this turn, and you draw a card. So yet another ramp spell. And then we play 2 copies of Urban Evolution. So you draw 3 cards, and yet again you can play an additional land this turn. I'm not really set on Urban Evolution. I feel like the deck doesn't have enough removal. I would really like to play, say, Anger of the Gods, but because it costs double red, it's kind of hard with the mana base that we're working with. You could obviously modify it, but other options would be like, say, Ratchet Bomb or Engineered Explosives. In general, the deck just doesn't have that much removal, so it can be modified obviously to make it better, but the general consensus is to use the Bloom Titan shell and try to integrate Maze's End into it. And that concludes my first deck tech. I'm just going to close things off by doing a couple of play tests just to show typical opening hands and whatnot. So we're just going to go to playtest here. And this hand is very, very acceptable. So you can go turn 1 Forest, cast a Sakura Tribe Scout, and then go to your next turn. And during your next turn you can use the ability of Sakura Tribe Scout to bring in any one of these. You can also do that at instant speed. So once again, if you are up against Dredge, you can wait until the last minute to flash in a Bojuka Bog. We're just going to put in a Guild Gate with that ability. We'll play another Guild Gate, and then we'll just use Ancient Stirrings. And as you can see, the deck's performing pretty well. Just going to take a look at the top 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll probably take another Guild Gate there off the top 5. Let's restart. Let's look at another hand. And once again, this hand is quite acceptable. Let's take a look at one final hand. And yeah, this hand looks good too. So 3 play-tested hands and seems to be okay. So there you have it.